Carl Jung's psychological perspective on the Trinity approaches the Christian doctrine not as a literal theological truth, but as a symbolic representation of deep psychic realities. He interpreted the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, not only as a central symbol of Christian faith, but as a meaningful expression of inner psychic processes, particularly the movement toward wholeness and balance within the self. In traditional Christianity, the Trinity signifies a unity of three divine persons in one God. For Jung, however, this triadic structure reflects a particular configuration of consciousness, one that attempts to symbolize divine completeness but ultimately reveals a psychological tension. Its very structure implies exclusion, that is, it omits a crucial element. From Jung's perspective, the classical Trinity is a partial symbol because it lacks the fourth component necessary for true wholeness, namely the feminine, the earthly, the unconscious, or the shadow aspect of the divine. Jung was deeply influenced by the symbolic language of alchemy, where wholeness rarely appears in triadic form. Instead, it is often expressed through the quaternity, a fourfold structure representing totality and the integration of opposites. The four classical elements, earth, water, air, fire, the four directions, and the four stages of transformation, all served for Jung as archetypal images of the psyche's drive toward completeness. He believed that the number 4, psychologically, symbolizes the balance between conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, masculine and feminine. In contrast, the number 3, especially as represented by the Christian Trinity, leans heavily towards spirit, abstraction, and masculine principles. It privileges the heavenly and rational, while neglecting the earthly and irrational. For Jung, this imbalance rendered the Trinity a meaningful but incomplete symbol. While it captured an elevated spiritual ideal, it excluded critical dimensions of psychic life. The missing fourth could take various forms: the dark god, the feminine principle, such as Sophia or the Virgin Mary, the shadow, or even matter itself, each representing something repressed, denied, or projected outward. Jung saw several attempts within Christian history to correct this imbalance, such as the eventual dogmatic recognition of Mary as the Mother of God. But these were all unconscious compensation for what the original Trinitarian formula left out. These developments were not conscious theological innovations, but symbolic responses to the psyche's demand for completeness. In psychological terms, the Trinity represented a stage in the development of consciousness, but not its culmination. A complete God image and a truly individuated psyche required a symbolic move from 3 to 4, a movement from spiritual abstraction to psychological totality. From this standpoint, Jung viewed the Trinity as an image emerging from the archetype of the self, the totality of the psyche striving toward harmony. The Father represents the primordial source or the principle of order. The Son, as incarnate logos, serves as the bridge between the divine and the human, similar to the ego striving for consciousness and ethical awareness. The Holy Spirit symbolizes dynamic transformation, the movement that connects and mediates between opposites. However, without the inclusion of the shadow, the feminine, the unconscious, or the dark aspect of God, this triad remains incomplete, failing to reflect the full complexity of human psyche. In this light, the traditional Trinity does not mark the endpoint of spiritual development, but a transitional stage in the unfolding of the God image within human consciousness. Jung argued that Christianity had historically suppressed or externalized the missing fourth, particularly in its treatment of women, nature, and the problem of evil. This split between light and shadow contributed to a one-sided spiritual worldview and a repression of the unconscious in Western culture. Jung's reinterpretation of the Trinity thus calls for an expansion of the symbol to incorporate what has been excluded. He saw this symbolic integration as essential, not only for religious transformation, but also for psychological healing. Confronting and assimilating the shadow, those rejected, denied, or feared aspects of the self, is the psychological equivalent of reforming the inner image of God. Individuation, the process by which one becomes whole, becomes in Jung's vision a personal enactment of theological reconciliation, a sacred task not of belief but of becoming.